So, hello and welcome back yet again to Beverly of Graustark, who we seem to always leave in little baby cliffhangers, like sometimes bigger than others, like this most recent time when it seems like poor Baldos is under suspicion again after having just almost fought the general of all the armies, who definitely seems to be being set up as our major antagonist. I mean, I would think that it would be whoever this, prince, who I can't remember his name, and his sister who are invading the country, but no, the problem seems to be much closer to home with Count Marlanx, who seems to also be perhaps Baldos's rival for Beverly's hand, although she doesn't seem all that keen on it, and I can't say that I blame her all that much. I mean, she's like maybe 20, and he is married and widowed 4 times. I mean, granted, that can happen really quickly, but somehow I feel like he's probably at least in his 50s, if not much older than that. So I'm not sure if I were Beverly there would be much competition there, but that's just a me thing. But yeah, that is kind of where we left off. There are fires up in the mountains that at least Count Marlanx seems to think are because Baldos maybe sent instructions to his friends. Not sure. We'll have to find out about that. But that is kind of where we are sitting as we go into chapter 20 of Beverly of Graustark by George Barr McCutcheon, and chapter 20 is titled Gossip of Some Consequence. There is no time to be lost, exclaimed Count Marlanx. Ask Colonel Braze to report to me at the Eastern Gate with a detail of picked troopers, 100 of them. I will meet him there in half an hour. He gave others sharp, imperative commands, and in the twinkling of an eye, the peaceful atmosphere was transformed into the turbulent, exciting rush of activity. The significance of the fires seen in the hills could not be cheaply held. Instant action was demanded. The city was filled with the commotion of alarm. The army was brought to its feet with a jerk that startled even the most ambitious of them. The first thing that General Marlanx did was to instruct Quinnox to set a vigilant watch over Baldos. He was not to be arrested, but it was understood that the surveillance should be but little short of an incarceration. He was found at the barracks shortly after the report concerning the signal fires and told in plain words that General Marlanx had ordered a guard placed over him, pending the result of some investigation. Baldos had confidently expected to be thrown into a dungeon for his affront. He did not know that Grenfall Lorry stood firm in his conviction that Baldos was not a spy, and he had been supported by others in high authority. Marlanx, on the other hand, was bottling his wrath and holding back his revenge to a distinct purpose. Apart from the existence of a strong, healthy prejudice in the guard's favor, what the old general believed and what he could prove were two very different propositions. He was crafty enough, however, to take advantage of a condition that was unknown to Beverly Calhoun, the innocent cause of all of his bitterness towards Baldos. As he hastened away from the council chamber, his eyes swept the crowd of eager, excited women in the grand hall. From amongst them, he picked Beverly and advanced upon her without regard for time and consequence. Despite her animation, he was keen enough to see that she was sorely troubled. She did not shrink from him, as he half expected, but met him with bold disdain in her eyes. "This is the work of your champion," he said in tones that did not reach any ears other than hers. I prophesied it. You must remember. Are you satisfied now that you have been deceived in him? I have implicit confidence in him. I suppose that you've ordered his arrest? Said Beverly with a quiet scorn. He is under surveillance at my suggestion. For your sake, and yours alone, I'm giving him a chance. He is your protege. You are responsible for his conduct. To accuse him would be to place you in an embarrassing position. There's a sickening rumor in the court circles that you have more than a merely kind and friendly interest in this man. If I believe that, Miss Calhoun, I fear my heart could not be kind to him, but I know it's not true. You have a loftier love to give. He is a clever scoundrel, and there is no telling how much harm he has already done to Graustark. His every move will be watched and reported to me. It will be impossible for him to escape. To save him from the vengeance of the army, I am permitting him to remain in your service. Mostly, at least. His hours of duty have been changed. Henceforth, he is in the night guard from midnight until dawn. I'm telling you this, Miss Calhoun, because I want you to know that in spite of all the indignity I have suffered, you are more to me than any other being in the world. More to me than even my loyalty to Graustark. Do me the honor and justice to remember this. I have suffered a lot for you. I am a rough, hardened soldier, and you have misconstrued my devotion. Forgive the harsh words that my passion inspired. Farewell. I must away to undo the damage we all lay at the door of the man that both you and I are protecting. General Marlanx was too wise to give Beverly the chance to reply. And in a moment he was mounted and off for the eastern gates, there to direct the movements of Colonel Braze and all of his scouts. Beverly ran at once to Yetive with her plea for Baldos. She was confronted by a rather somber sovereign. The news of the hour was not comforting to her princess and her ministers. "Oh, you don't believe he's a spy?" cried Beverly, stopping just inside the door, presuming selfishly that Baldos alone was their only cause for worry. She resolved to tell Yetive of everything that happened in the park. "Dear me, Beverly, I wasn't thinking of him at all. We've discussed him jointly and severely in every other way, and he has been settled for the time being. You are the only one who is thinking of him, my dear child. We have weightier things to worry about." "Well, goodness, how you talk! He isn't annoying. Oh, forgive me, Yetive, for I'm the silliest, addle-patedest goose in the kingdom, and you're so troubled, but you do know that he's being watched. They suspect him. So did I at first, I admit it, but I don't. Not now. Did you read the note that I gave you out there?" "Yes, dear. It's just what I expected. He's known from the beginning. He knew when he caught Dagmar and me spying behind that abominable curtain, but don't worry me any longer about him, please. Wait here until we have reports from the troops. I won't be able to sleep until I know what those fires mean. Please forget Baldos for an hour or two for my sake." "You're such a dear. I'm an awful brute, sure enough. I'll forget him forever for you. It won't be hard, either. He's just a mere guard. Pooh, he ain't no prince." Whereupon, reinforced by Mrs. Anguish and the Countess Halfort, Beverly proceeded to devote herself to the task of soothing and amusing the distressed princess, while the soldiers of Graustark ransacked the moonlit hills. The night passed, and the next day was far on its way towards sunset before the scouts came in with their tidings. Not a trace of the mysterious signalers had been found. The embers of half a dozen fires had been discovered, but their builders were long gone. The search took in miles of territory, but it was unavailing. Not even a straggler was found. The so-called troupe of actors, around whom all suspicion centered, had been swallowed by the capricious solitude of the hills. Riders from the frontier posts to the south came in with the report that all was quiet on the threatened district. Dawsbergen was lying quiescent, but with all the readiness of a sulking dog. There was absolutely no solution to the mystery connected with the fires on the mountain. Baldos was questioned privately and earnestly by Grenfall Lorry and Dangloss, and his reply was simple, but it furnished food for reflection and, at the same time, a little relief to the troubled leaders. It is my belief, Mr. Lorry, that the fires were built by brigands and not by your military foes. I've seen those fires in the north near Axphain, and they were invariably meant to establish communication between separated robber bands, all belonging to the same band. My friends and I, on more than one occasion, narrowly escaped disaster by prying into the affairs of those signalers. I take it that the squads have been operating in the south and were brought together last night by the means of those fires. Doubtless they have some big project of their own sort. That night, the city looked for a repetition of the fires, but the mountains were black from dusk till dawn. Word reached the castle late in the evening from Ganlook that an Axphain nobleman and his followers would reach Edelweiss the next day. The visit was a friendly but important one. The nobleman was none other than the young Duke of Mizrox, an intimate friend of the unfortunate Prince Lorenz, who met his death at the hands of Prince Gabriel, and he was the leader of the party which opposed the vengeful plans of Princess Volga. His arrival in Edelweiss was awaited with deep anxiety, for it was suspected that his news would be of the most important character. Beverly sat on the balcony with the princess long after midnight. The sky was black with the clouds of the approaching storm, and the air was heavy with foreboding silence. Twice, from their darkened corner near the pillar, they saw Baldos as he paced steadily past the castle on his patrol with Haddon at his side. Dreamily, the watchers in the cool balcony looked down upon the somber park and its occasional guardsmen. Neither woman was in the mood to talk. As they rose at last to go to their rooms, something whizzed through the air and dropped with a slight thud in the middle of the balcony. The two young women jumped back in alarm. A faint light from Beverly's window flitted across the floor. "Don't touch it, Beverly," cried the princess, as Beverly started forward with an eager exclamation. But Beverly had been thinking of that very object that was quivering before her in the dull light, the saucy, aggressive, jaunty red feather. A long, slim red feather it was, and it bobbed to and fro as if saluting her with a soldierly fidelity. Its base was an orange, into which it had been stuck by the hand that tossed it from down below. Beverly grasped it with more ecstasy than wisdom, and then rushed to the stone railing, Yetive watching in amazement. Diligently, she searched the ground below for the man who had sent the red message, but he was nowhere in sight. Then came the sudden realization that she was revealing a most unmaidenly eagerness to him as well as to the princess, for she did not doubt that he was watching from somewhere in the shadows below. She withdrew from the rail in confusion, and she fled to her bedchamber, followed by her curious companion. There were explanations, none of which struck the speaker or listener as logical at all, and there were giggles which completely simplified the situation. Beverly thrust the slim red feather into her hair and struck an attitude that would have set Baldos wild with joy if he could have seen it. The next day, when she appeared in the park, the feather stood up defiantly from the band of her sailor hat, though womanly perverseness impelled her to ignore Baldos whenever he passed near her on his way to mess. The Duke of Mirox came into the city hours after the time that had been set for his arrival. It was quite dark when the escort sent by Colonel Quinnox drew up at the castle gates with the visitor. The Duke and his party had been robbed by brigands in the broad daylight and at the point not more than 5 miles away from the city. And thus, the mystery of the signal fires had been now explained. Count Marlanx did not soon forget the triumphant look that he received from Beverly Calhoun when the Duke's misfortunes had been announced. Shameless as it may seem, Beverly rejoiced exceedingly in the acts that had happened with the robbers. Mizrox announced to the princess and her friends that he was not an emissary from the Axphian government. Instead, he was but little less than a fugitive from the wrath of Volga and the crown adherents. Earlier in the week, he had been summoned before Volga and informed that his absence for a few months, at least from the heart of the principality, was desirable. The privilege was allowed him of selecting the country which he desired to visit during his exile, and he coolly chose Graustark. He was known to have friendly feelings for that state, but no objections had been raised. This friendship also gave him a welcome in Edelweiss. Mizrox plainly stated his position to Yetiv and the Prime Minister, and he asked for protection, but declined to reveal any of the plans then maturing in his home country. This reluctance to become a traitor, even though he was not in sympathy with his sovereign, was actually respected by Yetiv. He announced his willingness to take up arms against Osbergen, but he would in no way antagonize Axphion from an enemy camp. The Duke admitted that the feeling in Axphion's upper circles was very bitter towards Graustark. The old war spirit had not died down, and Axphion despised her progressive neighbor. I may as well inform your highness that the regent holds another and a deeper grudge against Graustark, he said, in the audience chamber where there were assembled many of the nobles of state late the night that he arrived. She insists that you are harboring and even shielding the pretender to our throne, Prince Frederick. It is known that he is in Graustark, and, moreover, it is asserted that he is in direct touch with your government. Yetiv and her companions looked at each other with glances of comprehension. He spoke in English now, for the benefit of Beverly Calhoun, an interested spectator who felt her heart leap suddenly and swiftly into violent insurrection. Nothing could be more ridiculous, said Yetiv, after a moment's pause. We do not know Frederick, and we are not harboring him. I am only saying what is believed to be true by Axphion, your highness. It is reported that he joined you in the mountains in June, and since has held a position of trust in your army. Would you know Prince Frederick if you were to see him? Asked Grenfall Lorry. I have not seen him since he was a very small boy, and then only for a moment, on the day when he and his mother were driving through the streets along on their way to exile. We have a new man in the guard, and there is mystery attached to him. Would you mind looking at him and telling us if he might be what Frederick could have matured into?" asked Laurie. Mizrox rapidly consented, and Baldos, intercepted on his rounds, was led all unsuspecting into the outer chamber. The Duke, accompanied by Laurie and the Baron Dangloss, entered the room. They were away from the assembly but a few moments, returning with smiles of uncertainty on their faces. "It is impossible, Your Highness, for me to say whether or not that man is Frederick," said the Duke. "He is what I imagine the pretender might be at his age, but it would be folly for me to speculate. I don't know the man." Beverly, hearing this, squeezed the Countess Dagmar's arm. "Hurrah!" she whispered with relief. Dagmar looked at her, astonished. She just couldn't fathom the whimsical American girl. "They have been keeping an incessant watch over the home of Frederick's cousin. He is to marry her when the time is right," said the young Duke. "She is the most beautiful girl in Axphain, and her family one of the wealthiest. Her parents bitterly opposed this match. They were to have been secretly married months ago, and there is a rumor to the effect that they did succeed in evading the vigilance of her parents." "You mean to say that they might actually be married?" said Yetive, taking a quick glance at Beverly. "It is not improbable, Your Highness. He is known to be a daring young fellow, and he has never failed in a siege against the heart of a woman. Report has it that he is the most invincible Lothario that ever donned love's armor." Beverly was conscious of furtive glances in her direction, and a faint pink stole into her cheeks. "Our fugitive princes are lucky in neither love or war," said the Duke. "Poor Danton, who is hiding from Gabriel, is betrothed to the daughter of the present Prime Minister of Dawsbergen, the beautiful Yolanda. I have seen her. She's glorious, Your Highness." "I too have seen her," said Yetive, more gravely than she thought. "The report of their betrothal is true, then?" "His sudden overthrowing prevented the nuptials, which were to have taken place in a month had Gabriel not returned. Her father, the Duke of Maltz, wisely accepted the inevitable and became prime minister to Gabriel. Yolanda, it is said, remains true to Gabriel and sends messages to him as he wanders in the mountains." Beverly's mind instantly reverted to the confessions of Baldos. He had admitted to sending and receiving messages through Franz. Try as she would, she could not drive the thought from her mind that he was Danton. And now came the distressing fear that his secret messages were words of love from Yolanda. The audience lasted till late in the night, but Beverly was so occupied with her own thoughts that she didn't know much else that transpired. There was one thing she did know, though. She wasn't going to get any sleep at all that night. And that is the end of chapter 20. So this one was all political intrigue and affairs of the heart. So it sounds like Beverly's still pretty darn convinced that Baldos is one of these princes, and now she's worried that he could either be secretly married or secretly betrothed and communicating with someone that he deeply loves. Young love. All right, predictions for the next chapter. Obviously, I'm not going to predict that Beverly just ignores him or decides to like go for Colonel Marlanx, because that would just be weird. Although it is sort of what I would expect in a modern romance, but they seem to be moving at a more direct pace with this one. So I bet she's going to confront Baldos, and he's going to tell her again that he is just a simple goat hunter, and she's just a very silly woman, and she needs to just chill out because he's a goat hunter. And she'll decide that she's accepted that, and then I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. Anyway, what do you think is going to happen next? I mean, which prince do you think Baltos is? Or Baldos, not Balto. I wanted him to be Balto, who was a sled dog, not a soldier. But yeah, which prince do you think he is? I mean, obviously, this is a modern American fairy tale set in a made up far off kingdom, so he obviously has to be a prince for our American girl to fall in love with and marry. The only thing I don't know is which one. I also can't remember the third prince. Was it like Cristobal or something? There were three choices. I only really remember Frederick and Danton, but there were three choices. So which one do you think it is? I'm sure it's one of them, although I have been proven wrong many times trying to make predictions about this book. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed that chapter. Please do leave me a thumbs up if you don't mind. It does always make me smile, and I will see you tomorrow.